creeds, confessions, and catechisms, and chaos. All coming up on the next episode of Coffee Break. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Coffee Break with Pastor Brandon, where we just kind of talk about cultural things, the things that I like to talk about over, you guessed it, a cup of coffee. As per usual, I am drinking Parable Coffee. This is their Brazil, this is their brew from Brazil. And so I got some and I tried it and I absolutely loved it. The Brazil one's very tasty, very smooth, if you like smooth coffee. Anyway, I could talk about coffee forever, but I got my South Dakota mug, I got my good Parable Coffee, and the topics for today. And the topics for today, first I don't know if I want to say address or anything, but kind of talk about what's going on. And I think it's a very mournful time in our nation where you see the death of a man. He was in the custody of police officers. He was already restrained. The officer had his knee on his neck and the man died. It's terribly sad. The man had a family that loved him very much, and it was good to learn that the man was known for his gospel advancement. He was known as a Christian, and so it was good to hear that, and knowing that this man did believe. But a lot of people are mad, and rightfully so. If I was the family member of that man, I would be very upset. A lot of people have been protesting, and protesting is appropriate as long as it's done peacefully. But then you started to see the looting and the rioting, and that's an ugly side of it. And it's not everybody who's doing that, but it's enough. It's enough people doing it, and I have my theories on it. I don't know if I'll go into detail on that, but I have a suspicion that the same groups that caused this chaos multiple times before, even years back, a very, very, very vivid memory of mine, and not a personal memory, but from the news, of something similar back in Seattle around 1999, I think. It was 1999 or the year 2000, around that time. I got a feeling, though, that's pretty much what's happening here and now. And so there's people who are legitimately protesting and just want their voices to be heard, and then there's people who are just looking to cause chaos and destruction. And ultimately what we see is the depravity of man. Absolute sinfulness, the inherent sin of man, and the unrestrained sin. When that sin becomes unrestrained, this is how we know that God is judging a nation, when you begin to see this sin unrestrained. And so that's kind of just what I'm seeing is just unrestrained sin and people giving into their actual sinful nature. And that's what it looks like, folks. That's what it looks like when God restrains a people. It is good, and it's for the benefit of our society. But when the society decides that they no longer want God, no need for Him, blaspheme Him, deny Him, eventually mankind will be given over to their sinful desires. And this is the result of it. Now, of course, the secular world does not believe in sin. The secular world doesn't know why they do what they do, and they just get in line with the chaos for the sake of chaos. But we serve a God of purpose, and there is a purpose behind the evil, and that evil behind it is sin. There's something driving that evil, and it's sin. And although they don't believe it, they are the living testimony of it. It's a great tragedy. I know it's just sad all around. I'm trying to restrain from saying a lot on social media because so many people are highly emotional too. So if you try to bring any reason into the conversation, they kind of bite your head off. And so just kind of taking it easy and letting people kind of think it through. But I don't think everybody's thinking it through. The same hate that causes a racist person to take the life of a person of another race is the same hate that is being displayed out there in the midst of these protests. Not from everybody, but it's out there, and it's enough where you're seeing damages be done to innocent people. And so what we have is an act of injustice. A man who was already in the custody of cops should not have died in the custody of those cops because the cop was kneeling on his neck when he was already restrained and cuffed. And so there's an injustice that was committed, and people are upset about the injustice. And then they commit acts of injustice themselves to answer for the injustice. And so what we're seeing is hypocriticalism and in its finest form, and people who are not thinking this through. We are committing more injustices trying to demand justice. And so, hey, just think it through, folks. That's all I'm saying. I don't know if anyone out there watching this is out there looting or rioting, but hey, in case someone is, just think it through. All right. You may have noticed a different setting. Last August, we flooded, and my study was originally up here and then in this room, and then I moved it to the basement for more space, and it flooded, and so lost a lot of stuff down there. And I wanted to kind of rebuild it back up to the nice study that I had, but then just too afraid of flooding again and losing stuff again. And so I lost a good chunk of this, but I got a good chunk of it back too. And so decided to come back up here, and it's nice. It's good. It's good lighting. It's good feel. It's good for these videos, the filming, because of the lighting, and now I'm kicking myself for ever leaving it. Anyway, let's talk creeds and confessions and catechisms. That's really what I had planned to talk about. So let's talk about that. So creeds and confessions are statements of faith that are written by a group of people and agreed upon, that this is what they would say, that we affirm this is what the core doctrine of scriptures teach, and this is what we believe, and they call it a statement of faith. Now, put your imagination caps on for a moment. Imagine a time where education was not available for everybody, and chances are you who are watching this, you were not educated. You don't know how to read, and so suddenly you hear this good news, but you want to know more, but you're not able to read it for yourself. What do? If you are incapable of reading the word yourself, what do? Well, the church's response was, to come up with creeds and confessions, make a statement of faith, in other words, and recite them. And when you recited them, it helped those people who were not educated, who have not the ability to read, help memorize the core doctrines. And so you have things like the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, the Athanasius Creed, and so these things are statements of faith. And they would recite them, and people would memorize them, and this would help people take a stand in their faith. It would help them block heresy, because it would be the core doctrines that were memorized, and when it confronted what they memorized, they knew, hey, you're talking about something that's not okay. You're talking about something that's heresy, that goes against the confession. And so that was the point behind those. It was all for making a statement of faith. The creeds were typically smaller, and the creeds usually it has to do with the culture, what the culture is doing, and so they'll have an emphasis on certain things. And so the Apostles' Creed is not super Trinitarianism, but the Nicene Creed and the Athanasius Creed is. It's Trinitarian, but it's not. There's really the focus on God the Son is really emphasized in the Nicene Creed, and that's because of the heresy that was going around in their time. And so there was a old heresy that they were saying Jesus was not the begotten Son of God, and they would chant. There was a time when this is called Arianism. There was a time when the Son was not, and so the Nicene Creed has a very strong emphasis on Jesus being the Son of God, being equally divine and equally God, but also being distinct from the Father. And so typically that's where you see these confessions. They reflect the culture. You get towards the Reformation, and they have much longer, bigger confessions in more detail, and they were able to work them out. But this is against the Catholic Church quite a bit, and it was defining a very Protestant. These are Protestant confessions, and so you have the Heidelberg one, and the Westminster, and then the 1689 London Baptist Confession. There was actually one before that. There's two London Baptists, but the 1689 was kind of like the official year, I guess, if you want to call it that, when they were legally allowed to kind of come out of the woodwork as Baptist. And then just the confessions kept on going. Now, some people take issues with that today, and the modern churchgoer and the modern day Baptist, especially, at least like kind of a mainline Baptist, they really are not a fan of them. They think it puts a restriction on Scripture, and so they're not a fan of them. But they all go to churches that have their own statement of faith. Just about every church has a statement of faith. If they don't have one, run. Get away from that ministry. You have no business being in that ministry. Because they're hiding something. You want a ministry that's open about what they believe and saying, this is what we affirm as a church, this is what we preach at this church, and this is what you have to agree to in order to become a member. And so that's pretty common with ministries, is having a statement of faith. And so it's not it's not as super universal as it used to be. It wasn't just like the Baptists had the 1689 Confession. Your Presbyterians just had the Westminster. Now there's all different kinds. Each church kind of has their own. Now the Southern Baptist has their own confession, and Converge has their own little confession, and if you're associated with the denomination, the denomination's going to have a confession, and sometimes it's an old one. It's a denomination may say, we affirm the Westminster Confession, or we may affirm the 1689 London Baptist Confession. Now, myself, I'm a big fan of the 1689 London Baptist. It is very similar to the Westminster Confession, but where the Westminster Confession is a Presbyterian confession of faith. Very good, but that has its spots of infant baptism. The 1689 London Baptist Confession has obviously a kind of a creedal baptism. It's cradle baptism, and instead of paedo baptism, but that would be the big difference. The other difference in that is that it's different in its covenant theology and how it understands covenant theology. The Baptists were a little bit different from the Presbyterians and how they understood covenant theology, and I think the Baptists can make a stronger case in their case as far as the 1689 London Baptist goes. Now, there are a lot of 1689 London Baptist confession churches out there. There's a lot of pastors who pastor at churches who don't hold to that confession, but they themselves do. I enjoy the 1689. I enjoy looking at it, enjoy studying it. And so now we get to catechisms, and catechisms get kind of dicey with some Protestants, especially in kind of a more of a traditional Baptist background. They really take issue with catechisms because they think Catholicism, and they shouldn't think Catholicism. Now, catechism is just questions and answers, and so this was another tool to help train people who could not read, and so you would recite questions and give an answer and help you learn these things, learn things from the Bible. I don't know if I got one in here. I got a kids one right here. This is one I read with my kids. And so they will ask, like, in this one, question 1, who made you? And the answer would be God. This would be a good thing to go through with kids. I mean, there's multiple questions in here. Question 2, what else did God make? Answer, God made all things. Question 3, why did God make you and all things? Answer, for his own glory. And so that's a catechism right there. It's to help people memorize, ask these questions and memorize, and it's a learning tool is what it is. These are not authoritative. The creeds, confessions, and catechisms, I think in some circles, some people use them as the source of authority, but they're not authoritative. Scripture is our only authority, and these statements and catechisms are simply just based on what these movements believe the scriptures are proclaiming. And so catechism is just questions and answers, and I do believe that the Protestants started it first, and the Catholics kind of came in and came up with their own shortly after as kind of a counter-reformation, and people just got so used to the Catholic Church having their catechism and doing that, but it simply just means questions and answers, and it's good. Questions and answers are I think some of the most it's the most edifying way to learn. I think it's the most I think it's the fastest way to learn too. I think if you ever watched a conference like a Ligonier conference or the G3 or the Shepherd's Conference that John MacArthur has, they have the teachings and then they do the questions and answers. I think the questions and answer sessions are more impactful, more edifying, and the fastest way to learn things, just to hear the question and hear the answer. And so I'm a big fan of it. Now, book recommendations. For creeds, I got We Believe by Michael Horton. I've read this one all the way through. Actually, I wrote a paper on the Apostles' Creed for seminary, and so that was one of my resources. And that one's a pretty neat book. I enjoyed it. It kind of gives a little bit of the history of the Apostles' Creed, and then kind of a teaching on it too. And so that one's pretty neat. Another one is this little guy, The Apostles' Creed for Today by Justo Gonzalez. Justo Gonzalez is he's a historian and a theologian, a very good historian too. One of my favorite historians, actually, as far as Christian historians go. And so this was more historical. Obviously, I got a little bit more of the history out of that one. So these two books these are both the Apostles' Creeds. For confessions, I have not read this, but I plan on to. Truths We Confess by R.C. Sproul. Anything R.C. Sproul, get it. anything R.C. Sproul, get it. Even if you disagree with it, it's going to be well worth your time. He's just great. R.C. Sproul passed away a few years ago, but he's definitely one of my favorites to read and to listen to. He was just great, and I know I'm not the only one that thinks that. He had a very big ministry and left a very big impact on our world. So this is one of them. That's great. Now, one I have poked through was the modern exposition of the 1689 Baptist Confession of Faith. And this is the 5th edition. I've read this. Honestly, I'm not a big fan of this book. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but I wanted more. I wanted more out of this, and so I am hoping that James Renihan, or one of the Renihans, I forget the who's who, but I'm hoping they come up with a systematic theology book based on the 1689 Baptist Confession. I heard that they were working on it at one point, and then things got too busy for them, and they had to stop. Can't remember which one was working on it, but I know one of them is either the father or the son. The other books, well, I don't know where that one's at, but I know there's another one in here somewhere. Oh, this one's based on the Westminster Larger Catechism, and so this is a commentary on that too. Johannes Vos, and I picked through this one, and it was decent. And so this is one to kind of get your hands on if you can. A catechism in general, just kind of get your hands on. It's pretty fun to have. You could download them free on your phone. Same with all these confessions. You can download them free on your phone. And some of these books may even be relatively cheap. Other than that, I don't know if I got any other books that are very confession based. I know I probably do got some in here somewhere, but those are the ones I could think of off the top of my head. So anyway, guys, I hope this has been edifying. Don't be afraid to ever read confessions, even if you disagree with them. They're just part of history. They're part of our Christian heritage, and they're very helpful to learn. And they go by topic, and that's the thing about a confession. Actually, I should let's pull out the 1689. So the topics would be on the Holy Scriptures, of God and the Holy Trinity, of God's decree of creation, of divine providence, of the fall of man, of sin, and the punishment thereof, of God's covenant. And so you got these different subjects, and so it kind of gives you the subject title, and then states their statement of faith. And so it's pretty nice to kind of read and learn from. The confession is going to be a very short read for you. Any confession is going to be a very short read for you. And then you got all these that kind of expand on that. And they expand on those because the Bible has so much more to say about that. These are just statements of faith. They're not teachings of faith, the confessions. And so, anyway, I hope that this has been edifying. I hope that this has been helpful in some way. So, hey, hang in there, guys. Always looking for a coffee break partner. And so if you know theology and you want to get in on these conversations, hey, hit me up. I think it would be very fun to have a theological sidekick and partner to have a dialogue and a conversation with on camera about some of these things that we're talking about. And so, hey, if that's you, just don't be afraid to reach out. And yeah, anyway, guys, be safe out there. Be in prayer for our communities and our country. Be in prayer for peace and comfort for the people who need comfort. And let's pray for reconciliation and gospel advancement. And so I want to thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Coffee Break, and I hope you guys have been blessed by it. Thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful week.